shark bite, which numbers do you want to see? Do go over, show me that on your hand or hands. I'm not seeing numbers from some of these middle sections. Four, I see a lot of, and two, I see a lot of. And we'll do one more. Everyone pick one more number. Let's do three, sure. So 2, and 3, and 4. Okay, for number 2, state the slope of the given equation. So this is almost in slope-intercept form. It's a little, it's switched. So as long as you know that it's switched, the number before the x would be your slope. So m equals 2. Abby, could you minimize this timer? Thank you. Questions on that one? So if you put -5, that was incorrect. That was the y-intercept. Okay, for number 3, Jerry signed up for a streaming music service where there's a fixed cost for a monthly membership and a cost per song downloaded. His total cost is given by the linear graph below. What does the y-intercept in the graph represent? Okay, sure. The cost of the membership. Yes. So before he downloads any songs, and we take into account that cost, the monthly membership, that is the y-intercept. I'm going to say the monthly membership before he downloads any songs. Feel free to, if you need to switch boxes, like if you need more space to write something or do more work, feel free to switch them. Just cross them out and tell me which one it is. Questions on that one before we do 4? And then number 4 asks, find the slope of the given graph from 3. So if we were finding the slope, we could look for 2 points. We could start at the y-intercept. That's a good place to start. And then any other point that falls on the grid line. So let's say I did this one. So we have 11.99 at 0, and at 1, 13.24. So then to find the slope, since I have those 2 points, I'm going to use my slope formula. 13.24 minus 11.99 over 1 minus 0. And then we're going to calculate that. So go ahead and subtract the numerator when we get there. $13.24 minus $11.99. $1.25. And then 1 minus 0 would just be 1. So this, it doesn't ask us to find this, but if it asks us to describe this, we could say this is the cost per song downloaded. So for every song, it costs $1.25. Every song that he downloads, it costs $1.25. Questions on that one? I'm sure you go ahead and head back to yourself. Okay, so make sure all of those are written on your answer sheet. Hold on to your answer sheet. Make sure you put your little sticky graph on your answer sheet for number 5 if you didn't already. so that it doesn't get lost. We are going to look at decimal math really quickly. If there's any decimal math questions, we can go through any of those and then continue with our notes. So you guys had two decimal maths. This one was the domain and range. We did not make our 50% goal. That means many of you are missing this. This was informative, but remember that doesn't mean don't do it. So still go back and practice this. And then for the problems and context, same thing. We did not meet our 50% goal. But this one was formative, so make sure you go back and do that as soon as possible. You should have your notes out from last class. Does anyone need another copy of that? If you don't have your calculator, you need that. So I want to say that before we started this, I mentioned that there were two ways to solve this. We're going to go over both ways, and whichever way you like best. If you see a problem like this in the future, do that. You need the calculator. Okay, so one way to deal with 6 is to get rid of the fractions completely. To do that, I have to think of some number that both of these would go into, 3 and 2. What if I multiply something? What number could those both go into? 6. So I'm going to multiply this entire side, if I was writing, by 6. And our properties of equality say what we do to one side we have to do to the other, so also multiply the other side by 6. And as I'm doing this, I'm going to distribute the 6. Because this 6 is really a fraction over 1. So I'm going to multiply the 6 to everything inside the numerator and the 1 to everything in the denominator, but that wouldn't change. So this would become 12x over 3 plus 6x over 2 equals 42. Now, we still have the fractions, but they're about to go away because we could simplify. 12 divided by 3 would give us 4, and we would keep the x. 6 divided by 2 would give us 3, keep the x. Then we can do something that's called combine the like terms. These both have x's, so we can add them together. If one didn't have an x, we could not add them together. So we're just going to add the numbers, keep the x by itself, or put the x next to it. And then from that point, to get x by itself, just divide. What is x? And we talked about how to check ourselves by hand. I'm also going to show you how to check yourself in the calculator and Desmos today after we finish. Questions on that before I show you the second way? Got it. 6 times 7. Unless I did math wrong, which that happens. Okay. I'm going to do this off to the side, just where I have space. Actually, I'm going to just rewrite it. 2x. Okay. The second way would be to deal with the fraction. If we're dealing with the fraction, I'm still going to think of a number I can, these both go into. That way I can change these fractions so that I can combine them. We said 6, so I want to change this denominator to 6. How would I do that? What can I multiply it by? 2. So if I do that to one piece of the fraction, I have to do it to the numerator as well. And then if I want to change the 2 to be a 6, I want to multiply that by 3 and then also multiply the numerator by 3. So I'm going to change both of these fractions to 4x over 6 plus 3x over 6. And now our fractions have the same denominator, so we can rewrite that as one big fraction. Sorry. Because they share the same denominator, then I can combine like terms in the numerator. Then from there you have one of two options. You could get rid of the 7 and the 6 in 2 different steps, or you can do this all at once. So moving forward, I would like to see you just do it all at once, but you still can do it in 2 steps. I could multiply both sides by 6 and then divide by 7 to visualize. When I multiply by the 6 is canceled, and then I would divide both sides by 7. Or we're going to take this fraction and flip it and multiply on both sides. That's called multiplying by the reciprocal. So I would take this whole fraction, I can flip it and multiply on both sides. And I'm going to show you how to use fractions on the calculator. So in your calculator, if I wanted to multiply this 7 times, this fraction go into alpha, the green button, and then y equals at the top. And you're going to get something that looks like this. And you're going to go into 1 or go into enter. And that will give you the fraction bar. We want to deal with the fraction bar moving forward instead of dividing and getting decimals. So put in the numerator, hit down to put in the denominator, and then hit enter, and it will simplify that for you. Anyone need me to do that again? Okay. I'll just do the fraction part. So alpha y equals, hit 1 or hit enter to get your fraction. In your numerator, put the number and then hit down to get your other number. If you just put in a fraction, it will tell you if it's simplified or not. Did anyone still not get that needs me to show them? Alright, so you would get the same answer either way, it's just which way you prefer, dealing with the fraction or getting rid of them. On that same page, are there any others we want to see, do, go over, have questions about? Addie. 9. Yeah. Okay. In number 9, we're going to use the steps from above. If we have something to distribute, we have a number outside of parentheses, so we're going to take that and distribute it to everything inside, just multiplying. Be careful with your negative if you have other negatives, but in this case we don't. So this would become negative 15m minus 50 equals 126. We have like terms, we have 2 things with m, so we're going to combine those. And when we do that, we do exactly what it says, 4 minus 15, which would give us negative 11m. Bring everything else down. Then if we're trying to get m by itself, we got to get rid of the negative 11 and the negative 50. What would we do first?
Turn the 50 to the other side and make it positive?
Yes, we're going to add 50 on both sides. And then our last step,
can divide both sides by -11.
Good. Divide both sides by -11. Tell me what m is.
-16.
Thank you. And if you wanted to go back and double check yourself, you would put -16 in for both m's and then simplify that. And we should get that right. Okay. Other questions on this page? Did you have a question? Okay. So really quickly, I'm going to show you how you would check yourself in Desmos in the calculator. So like when you're at home working on Delta Math, you want to double check yourself. This is the way to do that. If you don't have your iPad right now, but later when you are practicing, try this. So we'll do Desmos first because that's easier. Okay. So let's say I take number 9. Desmos doesn't like other variables that aren't x, so change all the variables to x. Put it in exactly as is. 4x minus 5, parentheses, 3x plus 10 equals 126. And what will happen is at some point you'll get some line. That line will tell you what your solution is. So that's a great way to quickly double check yourself in Desmos when you're at home, but be able to double check yourself algebraically as well. In the calculator, we know that m was -16. So you can use m, you can use x, it doesn't matter. So everyone do this. Put -16 and then you're going to hit this STO button above on. A little arrow should pop up. Then you can either click X by hitting the button right next to alpha, you can hit alpha X, or you can do alpha M, the variable doesn't matter. So I just want it to be X. So I hit the button right next to alpha, and then I hit enter. It's going to look like nothing really happened, but what it did is it put -16 in for the variable of X. So every time I put in X now, it will say -16. So I'm going to do the same thing I did in Desmos and put that number in. 4x minus 5 parentheses 3x plus 10. But I'm also going to put in the equals. So to get there, I need to go into test, which is in blue, right above math. Anything in blue, you want to hit second first. So second math. Get the equals by hitting enter, and then and it's going to speak to you in calculator. 1, good. You did that right. That is the right answer. If, let's say I had +16 or some other number that wasn't negative instead, and I did the same thing, then it will give me a 0. Wrong. Something's wrong. You have to fix it. So that's another way to double check yourself. Yes. So when you're putting in negative, make sure you do the negative sign, not the minus. Any other, before we move on, any other questions on this page before we move on? When I was telling you about the Delta Maths, I think I misspoke because in Canvas and Delta Math it says the right thing, but I said the wrong thing. The multi-step equations that's due Friday, just the multi-step is informative, but the multi-step equations with variables on both sides, that one is formative. So I just switched those two. Okay. This next page, I'm just going to briefly describe, but we're not going to do a whole lot with it, and then we're going to move on to our favorite thing in the world. I was being sarcastic. It's word problems. Okay, so this is like a different way to double check yourself by kind of putting it into words. So we have some equation, and this really only works if it's a two-step equation. The pick a number is your variable. It's multiplying it by 7. Adding 5, the result is 26. So the steps here kind of explain how we got the equation. Then in the answer, you're like solving it. You start with 26. You would subtract 5 on both sides to get the next part. And then divide both sides by 7 after that. And then the what is the number that's looking for the actual solution. What is that final answer? The check part of this is actually doing this. Taking whatever the steps in the answer part are, subtract 5, okay, divide both sides by 7, so that number we get answers number 4. And then the second part is actually putting that back in and see does this work. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 5 is 26. So if you get a two-step equation, you could kind of work through this in words to help you figure that out. This page is really for practice. There are different spots that are blank. This one to start off, then it changes so that you can kind of fill in the others. But again, we're not going to do a whole lot of that. You can do that in your own time. Go on to the next page. Okay. So we're going to do number 1 and 2, and then you guys are going to do number 3 in a moment. We're going to skip number 1 for right now, do number 2, and then come back to number 1, just because number 1 is a little bit more challenging than the other. So previously we were doing in context problems, which was really you reading it and describing the characteristics, not really you setting up an equation to solve for a word problem. So they were different. But in this case, we're going to be reading it, finding information, setting up our equation, and solving to get an answer. A lot more steps. So with any word problem, I give this advice: circle or underline or highlight anything you find important. Usually those are the numbers, the question, variables if it gives it to you. So let's read this together. To mail a first-class letter, the U.S. Postal Service charges a flat rate of 53 cents and 18 cents for each ounce. It costs $2.69 to mail your letter. How many ounces does your letter weigh? What do we feel is important in this? Maddie? Okay, and these are different for 2 different reasons. The 53 cents says something about a flat rate. That's important. Okay, pretend that's yellow. And the 18 cents for each ounce is important. What else? Maddie?
The cost to mail your letter.
Yes. Okay, pretend this again. And then the question is asking us, how many ounces does your letter weigh? Okay. So all of that is important. Okay. We're going to start with, I'm going to tell you some things first. Anytime you see for each or the word per, P-E-R, that's going to be something that gets multiplied. That's going to be your slope, usually, if this is in slope-intercept form. So the slope gets multiplied to x and our y equals mx plus b. So I know this is going to be next to some x. The x is usually going to be, if we're thinking slope is y over x, this would be dollars or cents over ounces. So the number of ounces, whatever this says, is going to be our x. The 269 in this case would represent your total costs. Total is usually your y. And then if you are paying some flat rate or some one-time fee, that's going to be your y-intercept. You only do that once. So if we were to set this up in our y equals mx plus b format, that would look like 269 equals 0.18x, because that's what we don't know. Leave that as your variable, plus 0.5. I skipped one step. Usually you want to define some variable. Whatever the question is asking is going to be your variable. So how many ounces? We said that was x already. So we would just want to state, okay, x is going to be the number of ounces. I would stay away from variables like t and o and I. Really because o's could be confused with zeros and t's could be confused with pluses. S's sometimes get confused with 5, so maybe not that either. Just be mindful of this. Okay, we have our equation. We know what we're solving for. Now we can solve it. Get rid of 53 by doing what? What 53 by doing what? Subtracting it to the other side. And then divide both sides by 0.18 and tell me what you get for x. Say that number again. 12. And then because these are word problems, we need labels. 12 what? Ounces. Okay. I skipped over this, but notice the different standards at the top. Some of them are similar to just solving, but some of them are also different. Do we have any questions about this problem? Okay. Most of your problems are going to be set up like this, but some of your problems will not, and they'll be set up like number 1, and it's a little different. Okay, so let's read this one. The length of a rectangle is 3 inches more than the width. The perimeter is 30 inches. Find the dimensions. What do we feel is important in this? Addie? 3 inches more than. What else? What are we looking for? What are we going to use to find it? It says those two things. What are we looking for? Maddie?
The dimensions.
The dimensions. So that's going to be your length and your width. And then it tells us what we're going to use to find that, the perimeter. So we need to know a couple different things about this. The first part of the sentence, the length of a rectangle is 3 inches more than the width. This is talking about the length. So I know I'm going to have some, in this case, I'm going to have two variables, the length and the width. And this is a cursive L, so that it doesn't get confused for one. The length is 3 inches more than the width. So if I knew what the width was, what operation would I be doing if it's more than? Addition, multiplication, subtraction, division. Addition. So 3 more than the width means I'm adding 3 to the width to get the length. Then it says the perimeter is 30 inches. So we need to know how to find the perimeter of a rectangle in general. How do we do that? If I had a rectangle and I said, find the perimeter of this.
Adding all the sides.
Yes, we would add up all the sides. And we could write length plus width to add up all the sides. But we could also shorten that. P is our perimeter in this case, to 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. Since there are 4 sides of a rectangle, and there are 2 lengths and 2 widths. Then, I'm going to replace some things. I know the perimeter is 30, so I'm going to replace P and put 30. I have this equation for L. I'm going to take that and put it in for L. So I took this entire equation and where L was, like we do with our numbers when we're checking, I put that entire equation where L was. Now I have some equation where I can solve for W. So let's do that. What would our first step be? Distribute the 2. So we get 30 equals 6 plus 2W plus 2W. Multiply to get 1 2W. There was a 2W already there. What would our next step be?
Add up the like terms.
Yes, combine those like terms. 2W plus 2W would give us 4W.
Change 6 to the other side.
By doing what?
Negative minus.
Subtracting. And then divide. What is W? 6 what? 6 inches. So that's one part of our dimension. We still got to find the length. How could we find that? We have something that tells us about the length that we could maybe use. The equation. So because we have that equation, I'm going to put 6 in for W. So that the length would be what? 9 what? So we found our dimensions, 6 inches for the width, 9 inches for the length. If I were to draw out a rectangle and add 6 plus 6 plus 9 plus 9, we should get 30. 6 plus 6 is 12, 9 plus 9 is 18, 18 and 12 does equal 30. That works. Okay. This is probably going to be one of the harder ones, one of the trickier ones when you get to word problems. Yes?
The last part.
This part?
Yeah.
So since we have that original equation, and we found W already, the width, we just put that back in for W and figured out what that is.
Okay.
Number 3 is going to be more like number 2, but you will have time to practice problems like 1 later. I'm going to give you like 10-ish minutes. It may not take you that long. It may. I'm not sure. To try to work through number 3. You're doing two different sets of equations for 2 different problems within the same problem. Make sure you have variables, that you're defining your variables. We didn't define them here because it was just length and width. You could have put L equals length, W equals width, but in that case, it's kind of assumed. If you need help, raise your hand and I'll be around. If you guys would like to move around for this and help each other, you can also do that. So I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes, and I want you to work through number 3, and then
I'm not done yet.
okay, we're going to quickly go through these. Abby, can you minimize the camera again? Sorry, thank you. So for part A, you should have had just one equation that represented the blue car rental. You had your slope. You had your initial fee, but you didn't have the number of miles or the total cost. So that would have looked something like y equals 0.18x plus 27.60. Questions on that? Patty?
I got the reverse, like the 27.60 plus 0.18x. Is that still correct?
That would be fine, yes. Now, if you put the x with the 2760, that's where it would be wrong. Okay. So then, similar for part B, y equals 0.14x plus 40.40. In part C, it wants you to calculate the total cost at both agencies to rent the car for 1 day and drive it for amount of miles. So the slope represents the cost per mile. So the number of miles is going to go in for x, and we're going to find y. So for the first one, if you multiply 0.18 by 280 and then added 2760, what would you get as a total?
$78.
Say that one more time.
$78.
$78. Alright, and then if you did the same thing for the red car rental, 0.14 times 280 plus 4040 would be for $79. Oh, $79.6. So $79.60. Okay. Then in part D, it wants you to explain which company is the better deal by finding the savings. So if we were to drive 280 miles, which one is the better deal? The blue. Why? Yeah. So the blue car rental, because you save $1.60, which is not a whole lot, but in the long run, better than nothing. Okay. That was supposed to be in blue, but. Then E, F, and G take, E is similar, but F and G are a little, F and G are a little different. So if the store rents a car for 1 day and drives it 400 miles, which company has a lower cost? So you're going to do the exact same thing, put 400 in instead of the 280. It doesn't want to do that. Okay. So for the blue car rental, when you put 400 in for X, what do we get there? What'd you get, Alex? 99.6. And then for the red car rental, if we put 400 into that, what do we get? Put that into your calculator if you didn't already. 0.14 times 400 plus 4040. 90 what? 96%. So it looks like, which one has the lower cost? The red. Previously, it was the blue, so maybe at a certain point, blue is fine and it's cheaper, but then at some point it changes. The more miles, if you have to go more than that certain point, then the red one is better. Now for F and then for G, we are going to change it because now we have the total cost and we're looking for the number of miles. So if I now know the total cost, that is going to be my Y value. My equation is going to stay the same. But now I'm solving for X. So we would do what first?
I just have the answer.
Okay. Tell me the answer afterwards. What would we do first? Subtract. I wrote this way too big. Tell me what that is. 7120 minus 2760. $43.6. 43.60. That's what you said? Yeah. Okay. And then if I divide both 5.18, Laura, what did you get? 242.2 miles. Did we have any questions on that part before we do G? G is similar, but now we're using 8340 and the other equation. So again, subtract. And divide. What was that number of miles? Go ahead, Cynthia. One more time. Exactly.
No.
0.4. 1.4. Thank you. I just can't hear it. I'm sorry. Next class, we'll start off by doing one more of the number 1 problems, but I want to give you a chance to work on Delta Math. So the Delta Math on these two are the word problems, 3.4, and then the multi-step equation. You can also be working on the discussions for those, as the discussions are due today. The Delta Math is due on Friday. So you guys can grab an iPad or your computer and be working on that.